Hey, this is Avi Gutman with another Ask Me Anything event brought to you by quantreasoning.com. I invite you to join me live next time. We do this every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern, and you can attend for free by starting your free trial at quantreasoning.com. Before I show the question to everyone on this slide, what I'd like you to do is hold your hand up in front of your face like this. And I want you to do two things. The first thing I want you to do is count the number of fingers that you have on your hand, although you might already know the answer without having to count them. If all is good with you, you should have 5. And then the second thing I want you to do is count the spaces in between the fingers. So nowadays, when we have a pandemic going, we have to wash our hands really, really well, including in between the fingers. How many spaces do you see? Like if you counted the spaces among the fingers, how many do you have? So why is that the number of fingers and the number of spaces doesn't match? There's a mismatch there. And if I described an alien to you, let's say I met an alien, true story, no, not a true story, but I met an alien, and I wasn't able to count the number of spaces among this alien's fingers, unfortunately. I didn't have enough time. But I did see that he had 12 fingers in each hand. Would you be able to somehow infer the number of spaces among this alien's fingers just knowing that he had 12 fingers in a hand?
I can see that there will be 11 spaces, but I'm just going by the trend that the number of spaces is 1 below. I'm not able to articulate why. I mean, I guess it's because there is nothing else beyond my 5th in order to create that 5th space. And then in that case, I will need a 6th finger.
Yeah, that's the thing.
So it'll never be the same.
A space is defined by the 1 finger on each side of it. If it doesn't have a finger on each side of it, then it's not a space. Like by definition, a space is only a space if it has a finger on each side of it. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason that the number of spaces is always 1 fewer than the number of fingers. And if you take that to the number line and say you're looking at all of the space from the tick mark at 10 to the tick mark at 20, the total distance there between those two tick marks is 10. There's 10 units of distance between 10 and 20. But the number of tick marks, if you put a tick mark at each integer, and you're also including the tick mark at 10 and the tick mark at 20, you'll have 11.
More toys do you
I
have?
wouldn't even think of it as 20 minus 10 giving me some measurement of number of tick marks. I would think of 20 minus 10 as giving me a distance, a total distance between 10 and 20. It's not really giving me a number of tick marks at all. It's just giving me a distance. Now, if we only put a tick mark on every multiple of 5, so you'd have a tick mark at 10, a tick mark on 15, and a tick mark at 20, then there's 3 tick marks. And if we're only putting tick marks at the even integers, there would be 6 of them between 10 and 20. And if we're only putting tick marks at the odd integers, there would be 5 of them between 10 and 20. So I think you'll benefit, JD, from playing around with such questions, looking on a number line, and seeing the relationship between a distance between 2 tick marks and the actual number of tick marks available. Right? And by the way, if you start from 10.5 to 20.5, it's still a distance of 10. That hasn't changed. But the number of tick marks has changed if we have tick marks at the integers. Now it's only 10, not 11. The number of integers between 10.5 and 20.5 is only 10. But the number of integers between 10 and 20, even though it's the same distance of 10, there's 11 tick marks there, including the 10 and the 20. Let's take this one step backwards first. We have X and we have Y. What kind of information might you be interested in order to solve this question? Are we looking at the product of X and Y, at the sum of X and Y, the ratio of X to Y, the difference between X and Y? What would be interesting for you to know in order to solve this? y minus x. Okay, so we have x and y in the number line, and we can tell from the language there in the free info that y is to the right of x. We do know that they're integers, and we want to know within that space how many are odd. And that's why you're saying I'd like to know what's the value of y minus x. And my follow-up question would be, well, what if you did know y minus x? Would that be enough to answer the question? If you knew the value of y minus x, would you then be able to say how many odd integers are in that space? I think you were thinking the right thing, but you didn't say the right thing. You said that we need to know the positioning of x and y, which implies you want to know where is 0 on this number line. Because if I know where 0 is, then I know the values of x and y, right? Is 0 in between them? Is 0 to the left of x, to the right of y? And JD was correct in saying no to you, because no, who cares where 0 is? But I don't think that's what you meant, Surajit. I think you meant something else. Yeah, it's not so much about whether x and y themselves are odd or even. It's about whether the distance between x and y is odd or even. That's what we really care about. Now, to Viviana's point, if we knew that x and y are of the same type, and this goes back to what JD was saying from the very beginning, if we knew they were of the same kind, they're both odd or they're both even, that would imply that the distance between them is definitely even. In other words, if x and y have the same remainder when you divide them by 2, then the distance between them is definitely even, and the reason that's important is, just as Estefania said, we would have an equal number of odds and evens within that range. If the difference between them was even, and we knew what that difference was, we could answer this question, because we could say half of that number is odd numbers and half of that number is even numbers. And this is because of the cyclicality of odds and evens, right? They're on a cycle of 2. Because this is, odd and even are only interesting words in the world of divisibility by 2. The minute you talk about the world of divisibility by 7, odd and even kind of lose their meaning. They're not interesting words. It's just in the world of divisibility by 2 where the cycle is 2. And that's why it's important to know whether the total distance on this number line is odd or even. Like if I had 13 consecutive integers, then 7 of them are odd and 6 of them are even, or vice versa. I don't know. It depends where I am on the number line. But if I have 18 consecutive integers, then definitely 9 of them are even and 9 of them are odd because they alternate on the number line. If you look at 56 consecutive integers, I took a multiple of 7 there, right? 56 is a multiple of 7. If you look at 56 consecutive integers, exactly 8 of them will be multiples of 7. Exactly 8 of them will have a remainder of 1 in the world of divisibility by 7. Exactly 8 of them will have a remainder of 2 in the world of divisibility by 7. Exactly 8 of them will have a remainder of 3 in the world of divisibility by 7. Exactly 8 of them will have a remainder of 4 in the world of divisibility by 7, and so on for remainders 5 and 6. There will be 8 of each type. So I purposely took a multiple of 7. It's important that there's a multiple of 7 consecutive integers. And if it is a multiple of 7, then we can make that claim that exactly 8 will be of each type. And what I mean by type, well, in the world of divisibility by 7, there are 7 different types of numbers. Remainder 0, remainder 1, remainder 2, remainder 3, all the way to remainder 6. There are 7 different types of numbers in the world of divisibility by 7. So if we're looking at a number of consecutive integers that is a multiple of 7, you'll have an equal amount of each type of number. So what I did is I took what we were just talking about and abstracted it to a different world. Instead of a world of divisibility by 2, we could talk about a world of divisibility by 7, but the concept remains the same. In the world of divisibility by 2, there are only 2 types of numbers. We have names for them, odd and even. If you want to keep it more abstract, call them remainder 0 and remainder 1. Those are the 2 types of numbers. So if you have 5 consecutive integers, you'll have 3 of one kind and 2 of the other kind, but I don't know which kind got 3 and which kind got 2. In the world of divisibility by 3, if you're looking at 5 consecutive integers, you'll have 2 of one kind, 2 of one kind, 1 of one kind.
2 of one kind.
What are the different kinds? What are the different types of numbers in the world of divisibility by 3? Remainder 0, remainder 1, remainder 2. So if you're looking at 5 consecutive integers, you'll have, I don't know where we're starting. It won't be an equal number of each type, but you'll have 2 of one type, 2 of one type, and 1 of one type.
In that cyclicality.
In that cyclicality.
I mean, in that.
Because look, this might help. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 consecutive integers. One of them is a multiple of 3. Possibly 2 of them is a multiple of 3, right? If that one is the multiple of 3, if that's the remainder 0, this will also be remainder 0. You have remainder 1, remainder 2, remainder 1, right? So in this case, we have 2 of this type, 2 of this type, and 1 of that type. What if we started from a different one? What if we started from R1? Doesn't matter. You'll always have 2 of one type, 2 of a second type, and 1 of a third type. 2 of one type, 2 of a second type, and 1 of whichever one is in the middle. Hey, I'm just going to interrupt my own video for a moment here. If you're finding value in this video, please let me know in the comments below. And give this video a thumbs up. It really motivates me to keep uploading a new video every day. Alright, back to the video. How many repetitions of the same day of the week you'll have in 30 days? So in 30 days, that means 4 weeks and 2 days. So 2 days of the week will repeat 5 times, because of that remainder of 2, but the other 5 days of the week will only repeat 4 times each. So 5 days of the week will repeat 4 times each, and 2 days of the week will repeat 5 times each in a 30-day month. Let's say we're talking about November, and I don't know what day of the week is the first day of November, let's say, but I can still say there will be 5 of one day, 5 of another day of the week, and then 4 of each of the remaining 5 days. It's the same concept. And I don't need to draw a number line to see that. I just know that whichever day of the week you're starting November on, that day you'll have 5 times, and the following day of the week you'll also have 5 times, and the next 5 days of the week you'll only have 4 times each. So there's definitely a benefit on the GMAT in cyclical type thinking. I just made that expression up. I don't know if that's a thing. I just invented it. Cyclical type thinking. To thinking in cycles. And it's something that we probably do in real life without thinking about it too much, like the example with the November, like how many of each day of the week we have in November. Or maybe I'm just weird. Like I've thought about that kind of thing many times in my life, but maybe normal people don't. I don't know. But that's what I would call cyclical type thinking. I'm curious, can you let me know in the chat box if at this point you would feel comfortable solving this question without pen and paper? Like if you at this point, after all of that discussion, could look at these statements and pretty quickly determine which one is sufficient on its own and which one isn't. So I'm going to take you through how I think about each of these statements, and I'm hoping that that will help. But I'm happy to try a few different ways of explaining this. So don't be shy about letting me know if it's still unclear to you. I think probably statement 2 is the easier one to evaluate. Because the number given in statement 2 is an even number, I can tell that exactly half of those will be odd and half of those will be even. This goes back to that discussion we were having about the cyclicality. It's an even number, so it'll be exactly 12 even and 12 odd, because we're talking about consecutive integers. So 12 will be even, 12 will be odd. And so now I can say a definitive answer of 12. The answer is 12. So statement 2 is sufficient on its own, and it'll eliminate the answer choices that claim that it's not.
Hey, Avi, are you saying that, I know this is talking about consecutive because it's odd and even. Let's say this same thing was given and you're asking for a remainder of 0 in the world of divisibility by 3, that instead of 12, there will be 8.
Correct.
Remainder 0.
8 remainder 0, 8 remainder 1, 8 remainder 2. And in that case, it would be significant that 24 is a multiple of 3. If it wasn't, then I wouldn't be able to say exactly how many remainder 0 there are, or exactly how many remainder 1 there are, or exactly how many remainder 2 there are. It would depend on where in the cycle we started. So if you're talking about February in a normal year, where it's 28 days, you can tell with certainty there will be exactly 4 Sundays, 4 Mondays, 4 Tuesdays, 4 Wednesdays, 4 Thursdays, 4 Fridays, and 4 Saturdays. Why? Because 28 happens to be a multiple of 7. Any other situation, any other month, you can't tell how many of each day of the week there will be. It depends on which day of the week the month started on. So just as you know for sure there are exactly 4 of each day of the week in February in a normal year, so too you can say for statement 2 here there will be exactly 12 even and 12 odd. If this said 23 instead of 24, that would not be sufficient. Exactly, because that would be like asking how many Saturdays are there in March. Well, I don't know. It depends on what day of the week was, March started on. I mean, I know it doesn't look that way, but this is really a divisibility question in the world of divisibility by 2. Now, Manhattan Prep would just call it an odds and evens question, which is fair enough, but in my mind, it misses the point. Like it then doesn't translate into tougher questions, because in a tougher question, it wouldn't be about divisibility by 2. It would be about divisibility by 7. And then, if all you've learned is odds and evens, then you don't really know how to handle the more difficult question. But this is a divisibility question in the cycle, in the divisibility of 2.
If that was 23, given that we discussed cyclicity, I can see one is going to be larger than the other. And in that case, it would be option C, because you know that evens are only 12.
Yes, the correct answer would be C in that case. That's right. Let's evaluate statement 1 on its own. So, knowing that there are 12 even integers inside of that range, how would we go about determining the number of odd integers in that range, knowing that on the number line we alternate odd, even, odd, even, odd, even, odd, even. There's 12 evens. How many odds could there be inside of this range? From statement 1, we can tell that there are exactly 11 or 12 or 13 odd integers in this space. So statement 1 is a very good statement. It narrows down the field of possibilities from an infinite number of possible answers to just 3 options. We now know the answer is either 11 or 12 or 13. Unfortunately, that's not sufficient, because we needed to know exactly how many odd integers there are, and we've only been able to narrow it down to 3 options, and therefore... If you found this video useful, go to quantreasoning.com for a lot more where that came from. You should also click that like button and let me know in the comments below what you'd like me to make future videos about. And of course, if you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and do that and click that bell below so you get notified about future videos. See you next time.